In Lecture 17 and Part 5, we talk about Jesus. This is not something that we should be surprised at when we, in Islamic theology, the fact that we talk about Jesus, because it's very, very important to us, isn't it? Even though in the books we have read on Islamic theology, whether it's Fakri or Fazlur Rahman, or people who aren't really Christian, evangelical Christians, they don't even mention it, because after all, they're talking about movements and people who've influenced Islamic theology. But to us, it's very important. And we're going to be doing some Muslim-Christian comparisons here. The usual or formal comparison is that the prophets are compared. In other words, Muhammad with Jesus. And the books are compared, Quran with Bible. The community is compared, that is, the Ummah with the congregation. The building is compared, mosque building with a church building. The liturgy is compared, and meaning the pillars of Islam and the worship of Islam. Now, let's talk about something that's a little bit more workable and functional. Now, you may not agree with this, and I don't agree with it completely, but let me just explain that as far as helping Muslims to understand some of the things that we're talking about, we're going to use this functional comparison. Now, it doesn't compare completely, admittedly, particularly when you think of the Quran being compared to Jesus, because it's not, but only in the sense that for Muslims, the Quran comes down. You see, the eternal word, which is the Quran, according to Muslims, comes down from above in the same way that we consider Jesus coming down from above. He became flesh, whereas the Quran becomes book. So the central focus of revelation is what we're talking about here. Now, Muhammad, the one who conveyed the message in Islam, to us, the similarity is the apostles who preached the word, the gospel. The hadith is that body of literature that in some ways compares in a functional sense with the Bible. The books, or rather the Quran, which is the next one, compares in Christianity with the person of Christ. In other words, the salvation center, and the laws and law and obedience comparing to trust and relationship, a major expression of faith. Sufism, in one sense, is like the presence of God and the Holy Spirit. So these are not perfect. Granted, they're not perfect comparisons. Not something that we would say is really deeper, but we're trying to reach Muslims with understanding. So that's why we have used those formal compare and then more meaningful, or at least deeper in that sense for Muslims, the functional comparisons. Now let's think a little bit about the Quranic Jesus. And here I'll just go quickly through some things. He is mentioned 93 times in the Quran, and you have these various things in your class notes. I might mention that I have done a paper on Jesus in the Quran. You can find it just by Googling my name, Warren Larson. The name of the paper is Jesus in the Quran. Something about similarities and the differences. In other words, there are some similarities, but also quite a few differences. Now, here are some of the things we could talk about. The honorable titles that are given him, and they're significant, like sign, mercy, witness, example. And the birth accounts, he is born of a virgin. There are surahs that are named after references to Jesus, like Maryam 19 and Al-Imran and others that don't make much sense to us unless we look at it closely. There is Isa in the Meccan surahs, number 6, 19, 23, 42, and 43, and then Isa in the Medina surahs, that is later in Muhammad's life, the last part of his, if we can call it, the revelatory career. And the virgin birth, there are terms, son of Mary, and that is found in the Syriac Gospel of Infancy 15 times. It's found in the Arabic Gospel of Infancy 5 times. It is used by Jews against Christians, but it is preferred by Muslims rather than Son of God, because as we know, they misinterpret the word Son of God. Now, as reference to Messiah, that's in the Quran as well, without special explanation. It's used, Al-Masih, but yet it's not explained. And nevertheless, there is some significance attached to it. In other words, Muslims realize that it does seem to be a special person. It is used against the Jews. In other words, in 4:156, they rejected faith. They spoke against Mary. They said in boast, we've killed the Messiah. You see, so Muhammad has his quarrel with the Jews. And we've got to keep that in mind when we look at the references to Jesus. Now, he's the servant of God. And the servant of God came with a book. He reveals humanity. I'm not giving you the references here because they are in your class notes. He is a prophet. And he is listed with other prophets in 684. Jacob, Noah, David, Solomon, Job, David, and others. And he is appointed a prophetic office. He does have a Qur'anic nickname, and that is Isa, which is pretty hard to figure out. And he is the Spirit of God. He is the messenger of God. He is the creative word of God. And because in the Quran in 3 and 39 it says that God said, be, and he came into being. He is like Adam, it says. That's the similitude, or similar to Adam. He's the Spirit of God 7 times. He's confirmed, and there are references there in 4:171 and 1917. His birth is significant. In other words, in 1915, it talks about his works. His works meaning some things that are not at all like we think of the works of Christ, like making little clay birds fly. But he does heal the blind. He raises the dead, 5:111. And there you have this table from heaven that comes down 5 and 114, which is, I think, a total misunderstanding of the Lord's Supper. There are special problems in reference to Jesus in the Quran. One of them is that the promise that Jesus made in the Gospel, John 15:33, that after him would come a comforter, is not only misunderstood, but I think perverted in Muslim thinking, because the Muslims in the Quran 61 and verse 6 try to make that out to be a promise of Muhammad. Now, it's fancy footwork. It has to be looked at. You have to look at the commentaries and so on, but basically it's a stretch by any imagination that the Parakletos of whom Jesus spoke was coming, that should have any resemblance to the word for praise. In other words, Muhammad's name is Ahmad. It means praised one. I think that, just if I could just pause here for a minute and talk about this, when Muslims bring that up, we need to think ahead of time, sort of some of the things we could say. Like, that the promised one came 50 days after Jesus, whereas Muhammad came 500 years. And Jesus spoke very clearly about the coming one, the Comforter, that he would be in you. He will speak of me. In other words, Jesus. He will remind you of things I have said. He will glorify me, and on and on and on. We have to go to the context, really, there to explain to Muslims with patience that Jesus never prophesied of Muhammad. When I was working with Muslims in Pakistan, they would often say to me, "Does your Injil speak about our prophet?" And I would say no. His death. Now this is a problem for us, and it is a problem for Muslims as well, as we'll see in a minute. The Meccan surahs mention, it says, the day of my death. It says that the Jews did not crucify him. 156 through 157. There is a verse in the Quran, 355 or 49, whatever version you're using. I will take you to myself. And then 5:19 or 17, whatever that verse is, only God can kill the Messiah, not the Jews. So that's a problem. Now, as for his resurrection, it says that God will raise him up, 348, or that God raised him up, 156. The day I am raised up alive, in chapter 19. And then the clay birds, 349 and 510, that he created out of clay. God can create. Clay material was used for creating mankind, and he breathed on them, and they became living birds. Now, the Qur'anic Jesus is identified. We think of, first of all, of the word Isa. That's the word for Jesus in the Quran. And Arab Christians don't use this word. For the most part, they don't believe it's the right word to use. They pronounce it different than that Isa. They sort of Isa. The Quranic name Isa is very different than the name Yeshua, which is used by Arab Christians, which is just a translation of Yeshua, of his Greek name. So in all of the Arabic Bible for Jesus, it is Yeshua. Isa is 25 times, 25 surahs, and it's 93 times in the Quran, 93 verses. So did I say that right? Isa is in 25 surahs, and there are 93 verses in the Quran that use this. But the origin of this title is very debatable. In other words, nobody is quite sure where it came from. In North Africa, I believe some Christians have translated Jesus in the New Testament, and they have used Isa sort of in a contextualization way. And I might also say that although the Arab Christians use Allah for God, they don't use Isa. And where I worked in Pakistan, the Pakistani Christians don't by and large, don't want to use the word Allah for God either. They use the word Khuda. They have another word for God. And they use the word Yesu, not Isa. So they're against both of those words. They say that they're too Islamic, and they don't want to use it. Now, there is the word Nasara in the Quran. That's the word for Christians. or sometimes Ahli Injil, whereas Arab Christians like to call themselves Masihayum, or followers of Messiah, not followers of Isa or followers of Yesu. A question, too, about where Nasara comes from. It's not quite sure, and I'm not going to go into it right here. I would say that the word Masihi is the word that we use in Pakistan for Christians. It comes from the word Masih, and that's the word for Messiah. And a Masihi is one who follows Christ, in other words, follows the Messiah. That's a good word. Now, sometimes the derogatory word Isahi, coming from the word Isa, is used, but that is really a word of sort of a put-down word, because the Isahi is one who sweeps, is a sweeper. And so we try to stay away from that word when we're talking about Christians in Pakistan. Now, number 4, by that is meant that Jesus is number 4. In other words, Moses is spoken of many times in the Quran. And then comes Abraham, then Noah, and then Jesus. And Muhammad compares himself to Jesus in Al-Bukhari, volume 4, paragraph 43, in the title Anbiya, which is prophets. He says, I am nearest to the son of Mary. Now, why he says that, I'm not exactly sure, but that's what he says. Jesus is untouched by Satan, and this is, I think, quite interesting. In that same chapter just mentioned, Anbiya, paragraph number 39, page 426, Muhammad says, there is none among the offspring of Adam, but Satan has touched it. So, when a child, having been born, cries, it means Satan touched it. Except, he said, Mary and her child, because they've been protected by God. So I think it's noteworthy, and can be asked of Muslims what this means, that Satan has touched every baby. Is there not a hint here of original sin? I think there is. Now, in Surah 359, where it says the similitude of Jesus before God is that of Adam. In other words, Jesus is likened to Adam. How? Well, created from dust, and just as God said, be to Adam, so he said to Jesus. So that is of interest. Why is, the question is, what Jesus is not in the Quran? Well, he is not the Son of God. You see? 9 and verse 30 says, Jews called Ezra the Son of God. Now, I'm not sure where they get this from, but that's what the Quran says. And Christians call Christ the Son of God, Ibn Ullah. He is not more than a servant. In 43 and verse 59, it says he was no more than a servant. Granted our favor to him and made him an example to the children of Israel. So, for Muslims, prophets are God's servants. They're all his servants. What he is in the Quran is that he is from Imran. Now, who is Imran? Well, this is a problem, because Imran, according to Numbers chapter 26, I guess it is, and 59, or Exodus 6 and 20, is the father of Maryam. It's the same word in Arabic, Maryam, the sister of Aaron and Moses. So, in the Quran, Surah 3 and verse 33 and following, it talks about the name of Mary's father, Imran. And my own view is that Muhammad got a little bit mixed up here. He doesn't have the context. He doesn't, it's an anachronism. He doesn't realize that this is a different Maryam. And so he hears about Maryam whose father is Imran, and that's what he's talking about in Surah 3. It is a big mistake. He is from Maryam, Surah 19, that's 19:16 through 66. So you see what he is not in the Quran and what he is in the Quran. Now, Jesus is not crucified. The Quranic Jesus is not crucified. You have Surah 4 and 157 through 159. That is a pretty strong denial. But we need to notice here that the context is polemic. Let's remember this. The context is polemic. It's leveled against the Jews. Because in 155 it says, they broke their covenant. They rejected signs. They slew the prophets. They rejected God. They accused Mary of being an adulteress. And 157 says, they say, we killed Christ Jesus, the Son of Mary. But they killed him not. But it was made to appear to them, and those they slew him not of certainty. And 159 says, none of the people of God must believe in him before his death. On the resurrection day, there'll be a witness against them. So, according to Islamic tradition, this is not the hadith, but the opinion of commentators, when the Roman soldiers came to arrest Jesus, God stepped in to save him from death, took him to heaven, and then someone else, probably Judas, was actually arrested, and God changed this man's appearance to make him look like Jesus, so neither the Jews nor the soldiers realized it. You see, we have to be patient with Muslims on this one because it is frustrating, to say the least. It is illogical. It doesn't make sense. It's not scriptural. And it's frustrating to listen to this kind of thing because we know that he did die. I might say that, there is an idiom, an Arabic idiom used in the Quran, which we could maybe talk about more, that it makes it sound like he did die, but by and large, Muslims reject the crucifixion, the death of Christ. Now, Surah 43, it says that at the end, in other words, in Jesus 43 and verse 61, Jesus is the signal of the hour. So before the signal occurs, he'll come back. And whereas he didn't succeed the first time, he will fight against the Antichrist. He will defeat him. He will destroy the pig. He will destroy the cross. Why? Well, to show that he wasn't crucified. And the Jews will then believe in him. The Christians will realize that he's not the Son of God. The Jews and Christians will know he's a prophet of Islam. And Jesus will marry, because marriage is half the faith, you see. Some traditions say that he'll rule 40 years, others 1,000 years. But these are some of the things about Jesus. Now, I guess again we would remember that the Quran is defending Jesus against the Jews. And it's a debate, remember, between Jews and Muslims. This whole thing is a debate because the situation has grown so bad between them. And the only problem is that the Christians are not in there. They're not in the picture at all. And as I mentioned above, there are 3 other texts about the death of Jesus. They make it sound like he did die, but Muslims reject the cross because they have contextualized Allah, and basically Allah would not allow it. So in 3, which is on the screen, 3:54 and 55, it says that Jesus plotted and schemed. The Jews plotted and schemed, but God also schemed. God's the better schemer. So we have this this problem of and Muslims trying to explain what it means when it uses that idiom for death, what it means that, when I'm taking you, I'm causing you to die, and one thing and another. Muslims will really struggle over this, and they'll come up with various and sundry explanations. One of my friends, who's a very good scholar in Arabic, has worked in the Muslim world, North Africa, claims that really the Quran, particularly 3 of the passages from the Arabic idiom, he thinks that you can make a pretty strong case for the fact that he did die. Surah 5, 116 to 117, God is asking Jesus, "O Jesus, son of Mary, did you say, 'Worship me and my mother'? Had I said something, you would indeed." In other words, there's a denial here that that Jesus ever said, "Worship me." And there are articles on this. You can find them in the Muslim world. One article I'm thinking of is towards an Islamic Christology, and that's April 1980. There were other articles as well. Now, Surah 19 is also about Jesus. Verse 53, it says that the Jews, it talks about Jews had accused Mary of adultery, and then she says, "Ask the baby," and then he defends her. But I want to talk a little bit about the reasons for Quranic denials. You see? Why? Why do they deny it so vigorously today? Well, and we'll soon be ending this, but you see, Jesus is a messenger. He was an apostle. You say so? Well, all the more reason why Jesus wouldn't let an apostle die. Because an apostle is higher, more important than a Nabi, a prophet. And one Muslim girl said, there are only, I think, 4 apostles and they were Moses, David, Jesus, and Muhammad. None of them died. Why would, and Jesus, why would God allow Jesus to die? Why does the Quran deny it? Well, because he's an apostle, because God is faithful. You see, he is faithful to his messengers. He protects them. You see, if you support God, he'll support you. He'll not let you down. God cannot lose. If the Jews, you see Muslim thinking, if the Jews who are God's enemies, according to the Quran, succeeded, then God himself would have been defeated. It's a serious challenge. So these are the reasons that Muslims give. Next time we will go into the Christian response to these denials.